Today I'm talking with Damian Kindler, a writer, a producer, TV, movies, who's living in Los Angeles. And the topic is really about performing under pressure. Because Damian, I think so many people struggle with that. So thank you so much for being with me and sharing your experience, because certainly in the business you're in, there's lots of pressure. And pressure to perform, to be creative. So, would you talk about what really got you interested in Prime Potential or feeling you needed to do something?
Well, thanks, Lynn. That's a good question. I think my first experience with Prime Potential was, I would say, about 10 years ago. When it was a while ago, and I had just been given a huge opportunity of producing a television show. Um, the pressure was enormous, and the workload was more than I'd ever um, encountered before. And you know, there was a this was a whole new frontier of success and career, and I was incredibly stressed out and negative about my chances of succeeding at it because I it just felt very it was beyond daunting. And when I first came to see you, it was because people had mentioned, that this was a very cutting edge and very, very efficient and incredibly effective way for people to um, unblock themselves and stop limiting themselves in terms of, as the title says, their potential. And I was desperate to try anything to hold on to what I had achieved and to take it further, but I really doubted my abilities to do it, you know, without significant help.
Well, and I remember a really pivotal point where you had to do a rewrite or something on an episode, and there was time crunch and all of that. And that just seemed like above and beyond all the rest of the regular pressure. Suddenly, this was, would you talk about that experience?
Yeah, whenever I talk to people about prime potential or, even just talk about watershed moments in my career, that example is the one I use. And it was the first season of a show I'd created, and I'd never run my own television show before. And running a television show, or as they call it, show running, is not, it's one of the harder jobs, outside of, um, running a government agency. Like it's a multi-pronged octopus that's always angry. And so when, for people who are experienced and done it before, it's not easy. But for someone who was new at it, it was very daunting. And so in the very beginning of this process, when the show first got picked up for its first season, um, I I I found myself in a position of trying to write a script within, I think, 4 days to that had been, rejected by the network and had caused me all sorts of, creative migraines trying to, as someone said, land a 747 on a aircraft carrier in a storm. It was a very difficult creative process. And I felt, and I, in retrospect, I don't think I was wrong that if I didn't stick the landing on this particular script, this particular episode, that my future as a potential showrunner is really, hanging in the balance. Um, and when I came to you, I was incredibly despondent, and if I'd put as much energy into my writing as I did into coming up with the reasons why it was impossible to do that, I probably would have written the same script twice. But in the end, I wrote that script in 4 days, and it turned out very, very well, which was a shock to me. But you were instrumental in helping me understand that, when you're faced with what seems like an apocalypse, you know, you're actually just dealing with a wall you've constructed that you simply have to just move through or climb over or, break through, because something's going to happen. Something, the time keeps moving on, the earth keeps spinning, you keep existing. So, sort of saying this is the end, puts you in the same category as, the Mayan cult people who are like, any minute now, the aliens will come and take us all away, and then the earth will, you could sit there going, or not. And so when you're faced with that, self-imposed oblivion, and it doesn't happen, you really have no choice but to just, you can either cave or you can push through. And I think you were very instrumental in teaching me that you have to put aside that sort of self-imposed paralysis and push through no matter what.
Well, and I think so many people don't actually know that there's another place to metaphorically be standing. So when you're standing in the place of panic and pressure and doubts and all of that kind of thing, and the mind just is running, that's the last place you're going to come up with great work from. And so being able to step out of that and step into a place where you could remember, in a sense, who you are, feel sort of a little of the calm and the connection to yourself. That was the goal, and I remember you leaving that session not really happy, but because you weren't sure you could still do it. The question of whether you could write it.
You see me again next week, I will be fired.
Yeah, exactly. And so that whole question of can I actually do this was still hanging, in the air. And I would have had no idea and still have no idea whether you could have done it or not. But what I did know I could offer you was the chance to step out of all of that panic and onto kind of a foundation where you could relax. We could at least have a shot at accessing all that creative ability you did have that actually got you where you were. And so it was very interesting to me to see what happened after that. And as you say, it was a very successful episode.
Yeah, it was, and it was a very important experience to go through that. What seems like a black and white, definite 100% disaster in the making can actually be an incredibly fulfilling and rewarding.
I think so often people think those kinds of changes take years. They take, hard work, and it's very painful, and you have to go into all of the past and so on. What surprised you about Prime Potential, or what would you say stood out for you about what was different about the experience?
I think it is so accurate in what it targets, and it's able to mine the very specific issues, deep issues that weigh us down, that we're not aware of, and it does it in a very efficient and very dramatic way. But that's often, there's that saying of, whenever something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So there's a sense of, well, how could this work? But I think that when you're guided through the process so skillfully, the way you do it, you're able to draw connections that you just can't see. And I think, like any form of, healing, whether it's conventional medicine, whether it's, massage therapy, whatever, counseling, it has an effect, a dramatic effect when it reaches the core issue. And I think that's what surprised me the most, is able that things that were blocking me, holding me down, limiting me, we were able to get to them and find ways to unpack them and kind of remove them from being such an impediment. So I think so quickly and efficiently. That was surprising.
Mm-hmm. And I know we were talking recently, and you said to me, as I look back, I have so much more capacity to handle pressure or, what it takes for me to start to feel that,
Yeah.
wobble or whatever it is so much more than it used to be. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean,
Because that's a great thing for people, to have more capacity just to handle more.
well, that's almost when it becomes one of the more important things, is because, you know, the reason we don't take on more is because we think we can't.
Exactly.
And there are people who do an incredible number of things, and they just kind of are constantly embroiled in 50 different things and happy as and relaxed as anything. And, you know, some of it you could make the argument is age, that as you get older you stop panicking. But I know plenty of people who are older who still panic about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's been a big deal in that, there's always more layers to uncover, that, you become proficient and successful on one stream, there's always more to go after. And, I became a successful writer and producer of television. And then in the past few years, I've wanted to take on several different projects at once. And that's kind of the next level
Mm-hmm.
of my career, which is to not just work on one project at a time, but to have, 3 or 4 going in this, just like a business, have multiple projects, of different priorities, but they're all part of your company's mandate and prospectus, if you will. And I think for me, learning to handle that kind of multi-layered, multi-platform, if you will, kind of career was daunting again, just like it was, 10 years ago. And so I've found it very, helpful to go back into Prime Potential again 10 years later and start to try to figure out what's stopping me from being able to, be effective and comfortable with expanding my professional life.
Mm-hmm. So last question for you. What would you say you now want? What is it that you're looking for internally, that brings you back to looking at the work again, experiencing a little more?
What am I? Sorry, I'm looking.
What are you now looking for? I mean, back then you were looking just to survive, get me through this, please God. Today, what are you looking for? What would you say you'd hope Prime Potential would deliver if you were just describing it today?
I would like, what I'm looking for is that kind of the looseness to think really big. Sometimes when we get a chance to go away on a really beautiful extended holiday to somewhere amazing, we have these huge moments of epiphany where we go, oh, I see what I want my whole, career to be, and here's my master plan. And I think, I don't have time to go do that. So I think for me, Prime Potential helps me get in touch with, the roots of my creativity and what I'm about. And that helps me think, well, this is what I want to do on a grander scheme and over a greater amount of time. And to me, that's a big deal. It's less about how am I going to survive here and now. That's always an issue. There's always challenges. But I think it's about, for lack of a better way of putting it, I think that for me, the attractive part of Prime Potential now is helping you really dig in and lay foundations for like your 5 or 10-year plan, you know, and doing that in a very accurate way that you can feel comfortable with, that really is, you know, signifies the authentic you. Isn't just like, we're going to do a whole bunch of projects that are going to make us a lot of money. And I think that's even part of the fear I have, is that, you know, just doing things for commerce feels like it has there's a damage being done. And so finding, it's important to kind of get in touch with who you really are in order to make sure that you're having the kind of career that you really, really want, because otherwise you're kind of swimming against the tide there.
Damian, thank you so much for sharing these thoughts. I really appreciate both your courage to do this work, your courage to speak up and share with others, because so often we put people on pedestals. We think it's easy for them. It's just difficult for me. And it's really wonderful when you share as wonderfully, humbly as you have, that this is a journey for all of us. We're all in this path of growing and learning and trying to really step into our own potential and bring it out in the world in ways that are good and beautiful.
Well, thanks, Lynn. I mean, look, I thought when I moved to Los Angeles, I would just meet, you know, dozens and dozens of incredibly successful, healthy people who had it all figured out, but it was really the opposite. They were very successful, but there was more psychic distress and neuroses and emotional pain than I could ever imagine. So I can tell you that, you know, at the highest levels, everybody is plagued with doubt and worry and anxiety and self-inflicted wounds, you know, that to you know, sabotage themselves, because it's not like people get more mentally healthy as they fly up the food chain. It actually is an inverse ratio. So it's very important to me to be able to do the work, because I don't think you can get very far without it. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.